Good afternoon. Today is Monday, July the 27th, 2026. And, we've got no shortage of conversation. We are going to discuss the end of 570 News, and we have, as well as some other radio topics, we have former talk show host and Brian Burke is back. Brian, it's good to have you back again.
It's good to be invited anywhere. I don't get invited back to too many places. You get one shot, and that's pretty much it. Actually, you've left off KW Broadcasting legend. Required when I make an appearance anywhere.
There you go. KW Broadcast legend. That's the phrase. That's the phrase. Well, here's the exception. On this show. You always have an open invitation right here.
Oh, I appreciate that. You know, it's so nice to get out to chat about the things that I love and the things that have been a big part of my life over the years. I said, good Lord, I spent over 40 years in radio, so it's kind of a soft spot for me, man.
Absolutely. So I want to start off with, now, the last time you were here, you had mentioned, I want to start here, you had mentioned that radio did to itself what it should not have done, quote. In your opinion, what does that, can you expand upon that? What does that mean to you? What did it do to itself?
Well, so I look at it in a couple of different ways, Ollie. And that is that to begin with, the people on radio were the original content creators. I know everybody talks about content creators now and influencers and things like that. But if you go back 40 years, you know, we were talking about the things that were relevant to people at that time. We didn't have the ability, the technological ability, to be able to save that, put that out in the stratosphere for people to listen to as much as they wanted to. But we were originally doing that. Then when the internet came along, they opted, instead of investing more in people telling interesting stories or people talking about what's happening in their neighborhood and their lives, they opted to tell less of that. They felt there is no money being made in the investment in that talent to tell those stories, so we just won't tell those stories at all. We'll just run something generic across the country. And as I say that, I have a number of friends who broadcast on stations that go right across the country at the same time. And they do a great job of telling those stories and making them as relatable as possible. I'm sorry, there's nothing like telling that story locally. And I think the radio industry just essentially said, well, the hell with it. We're not going to invest that money in there because nobody cares. But people care what happens in their backyard.
And I think, too, that's it, the whole sort of aspect. See, and that's what they did to save money, which really, it doesn't, they could do a great job, but I don't really see, if you're not in part of that, if one isn't part of that community, then all they're doing is just the research. And it's like, well, what does it mean? And I think eventually people listening are going to be able to tell.
Well, so I think the real problem here, Ali, is that, you know, we have these communities and look at stupid things like when is the latest fireworks presentation? And there's no singular media source to get the answer to that question anymore. Yes, you can Google it. I understand that. But, you know, Google is only so good if you actually go and search for what you really want to find out about. Other than that, you need this information that's bombarded at you from different sources, whether that's the internet or AM or FM radio, you know, to kind of knock into your head, oh, this is when those fireworks are happening. You know, and I just think we've lost a lot of, you know, local touch because these stations shut down and they're never, ever, ever replaced.
No. And speaking of which, when you found out about the end of 570 News, what went through your head? Now, of course, I was surprised that they shut down 6 in a row, right? Bang, bang, bang.
Well, you know, to be honest, I left. Holy cow! How many years ago is it now? 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago, I left.
Yep.
And at the time, I felt it was on some kind of shaky legs. You know, because they made no effort to replace an afternoon talk show, which, to be honest, is not that expensive to put on the air. Certainly not for what they were paying me. Um, uh, they made no effort to replace that over the last year and a half, as Mike took his much deserved vacation time. They made no effort to replace that. They just replayed the show from the day before. However, technologically, I thought they had another 5 years, and I've told people who were let go in that situation that that's what surprises me. I thought you guys had another 5 years. Apparently, they did not. But the end of AM radio, as we knew it and as it was presented to us, was pretty obvious. For me, probably 10 years ago, because I was inside the business, and certainly I think people should have figured that out about 5 years ago. But yeah, it's that I was upset for the people who I know, and in some cases who I helped get jobs at a place like that. But I wasn't, to be honest, I wasn't really surprised.
Yeah, and I mean there were a number of them there that were there for quite a while.
Oh, it's very true. Mike had been there for quite a while.
Yep.
Paul McPhee, who did the afternoon news, Paul had contacted me when I was still news director at Cool FM in Kitchener, looking for a job. I did not have a job available at the time. However, I did know a guy in Brantford who was the news director there, and he had an opening. And then I had recommended Paul go talk to the people in Brantford, and I talked to the people in Brantford. Anyways, long story, a little bit longer.
Oh, we like that.
Paul ended up getting the job, and then eventually came up to 570. Just what I would describe as the quintessential news person, and that you don't see a lot of that in the radio business anymore because they've blurred the lines, of what a news person does and what an entertainment person does. And I'm the first to admit that I was a large part of that. But just to me, one of the best people I knew in the business, and it was unfortunate it happened the way it did. But again, not surprised.
No, and I wasn't either. And I'm pretty sure this was planned for that. For that, it had been planned for quite a while. It just never came out.
So let me just relieve you of any concerns you might have here. There's nothing that a company like Rogers or Bell or Chorus and any major company in this country does without a significant amount of planning. They don't just wake up on Monday morning and go, you know what we should do? We should fire 280 people. That's just not what happens. I've been part of those discussions. At a higher level, it is something that it's painful to do. It is sometimes necessary. So, and this will paint me in a bad light, perhaps. I can see Rogers' point in doing what they're doing, but I also believe that there's a higher calling that you need to provide the ability for people to get information locally, no matter whether they have the internet or not. And I think radio still had a role to play in that. So while I might understand Rogers' decision because it creates value and it improves the price of their shares, and I'm a Rogers shareholder, so I know this, I also think that they have a bigger obligation in terms of the airwaves that they use that are a public resource.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. That makes sense as well because I think too, some people people. People that had mentioned it to that. There were a lot of some people had been surprised. I personally wasn't because I think the signs were there of the shutdown.
Well, the signs have been there for a long time, but
yep.
Can you make money off an AM transmitter in the city the size of Kitchener? Yeah, you probably can. How much money I don't know the answer to because AM transmitters are very expensive to keep running. And then you've got to have people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All those things that matter. So like I say, I wasn't surprised. I also wouldn't be surprised to see somebody step up and try to do something with it. That has happened in other areas around Hamilton and Niagara. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and so you could see a possibility of it maybe coming back.
Somebody's got to have $1 million in their pocket to do it.
Yeah.
To be honest, you've got to purchase the license from Rogers, and I'm sure, as Rogers is, they will be very malleable to the lowest price possible.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm being sarcastic. You got to buy that. You got to buy the equipment. You got to hire the people. And I'd be honest. Look, I was probably one of the last wave of people in Kitchener-Waterloo radio who made any real decent money. Now today, probably hire a morning show host and pay them $40,000 a year, and they'd be happy. So I know that will be surprising to some people, but that is the reality of the business today. So you can put some people on the air. If you've got to have at least $1 million in your pocket to get it started. And is there payoff from that? I don't know. I honestly don't know.
I mean, in the one side now, if it were to come back, like they wouldn't be able to do things in the same ways that they did. For example, they wouldn't be able to do things like all news mornings and afternoons again because that was a Rogers thing.
No, they can do that all they want. Absolutely nothing stopping them from that. They just can't call it that. And actually, they probably could call it that. No one would care. Rogers gave up the license. I don't imagine Rogers, a multi-billion-dollar company, is going to fight over the name of whatever your morning show is. And at the end of the day, the name of the morning show doesn't matter. It's the service that you provide. So they'd have no problem doing that. They'd have no problem doing traffic. They can do all of that stuff. It's a matter of what boils down to this, Ollie. It's a matter of, can you sell enough advertising time to make money? Because it's not a public service venture.
No, and I mean that will certainly be interesting. Now, if you look now, they had major rights. The Jays, of course, were in-house because that was a Rogers property. I think the real thing would be I don't see the Jays and Leafs kind of coming back to say a station in this. I don't think the country station. I don't know. I don't see it fitting on the country station, but I don't see that happening because you can stream the audio of it. But I think the one thing is the Kitchener Rangers rights. That was sort of a huge sort of thing, and they had the rights for many years.
Let me ask you a question, Ali. How many people listen to a Rangers game on Friday night?
I don't know.
That's kind of the point of my question. Look, it's one of the things radio learned many, many years ago is that if it's on after 7 p.m., no one gives a shit.
Yeah.
Because that's television time,
my
friend. That's why the Jays... Look, I love listening to baseball on the radio. I do. I always have. Probably a leftover from those days, on my pillow. Listening to Montreal Expos on a little transistor AM radio. So I love listening to baseball on the radio. Hockey, not so much. I don't think it translates as well on the radio. I don't know the numbers. I know the numbers are out there. Rogers would have access to them. But I don't know. If you get 7,000 people at a Rangers game on a Friday, Ollie, do 2,000 people listen on the radio?
Yeah, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? I mean,
do 1,000 people listen? And if that's the case, so then you have, look, I know for a fact that, the Rangers never charged anybody for the rights to the broadcast. It wasn't like there was $100,000 fee. That wasn't happening. So absolutely great publicity for the Rangers, get on there all the time. Would another station pick it up? Let me ask you this question, Ali. Do you think the Rangers are in contention for the Memorial Cup next year?
Honestly, I actually kind of feel they're going to take a step. I feel like it's going to be a step back after this year. I don't know how. I don't know how. I can't say I see it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Look, they load it up, and that's what happens in junior hockey. So no disrespect to the Rangers at all. That's what you do when you have a shot. And I think the Rangers hierarchy very much, and they'll hate this, want to be like the London Knights. Where if you're not at the top level of contention, at least you're in contention. At least you're in the conversation. So I think they would very much like to be in the conversation next year. The reality is that I've been around long enough, Ali, that I've seen years where the Rangers don't draw that well because they're terrible. It happens in junior hockey. It does. And I think the Rangers organization wants to do everything they can to avoid that. But as far as putting Rangers back on radio again, I can tell you the only reason another radio entity would want to do that is because, and you probably know the answer to this, Ali, so here's your quiz. Why would they want to do that?
Why would they want to do that?
Why would they want to put the Rangers back on the radio?
The broadcast?
Yeah.
Is it to, well, okay, this is a good question. So, would it be to give, would it be to give the broadcasters a shot? Maybe.
No, nobody gives a rat's ass. The only reason the radio station would put the Rangers
the money
onto the radio is to make money.
Yeah, the money, the revenue, the money.
They don't care about anything else.
Nope.
They don't. I hate to say it, but they don't. So if CKWR 98.5 community radio station decides to put the Rangers on the air, it will be because they think they can make money.
Yeah, the money. It's all about the money, isn't it?
It will always be about the money.
Yes.
And if the Rangers control their own thing here. So I could see a situation where they decide to broadcast the games only over the internet.
Yep.
But let's remember, Rogers TV already broadcasts the games.
Yep.
So would they do both? No, they probably would not. Right? So finding a pure radio outlet, it's possible. For FM stations, it may go against what they're allowed to do under their license. So there are a lot more complicating factors here than just let's pick it up. And remember, off the very top of the charts on this is that if you decide to do the Rangers games, you have to cover the cost of the broadcast lines. Are you going to do home games and away games? Because away games get kind of expensive. And then you've got to pay your play-by-play guy. And you know what? If I'm Mike, I'm the voice of the Rangers. I hold out for as much money as I can get.
Yep.
Quite honestly, that's me. Mike is a better person than I am, so he probably wouldn't do that. But if it was me, I'd hold out for as much money as I can. So I'm interested to see what the Rangers can do, because no matter who does it, whether it's a CKWR 98.5, or a CKMS, or whatever local radio station takes it on, or if it's the Rangers, the end of the day, the decision will be driven by who can monetize this the best. Sorry, that's just the world we live in. Nobody gives a damn about, what's going to give the Rangers fans the best access to the games. Nobody cares. It's about money.
So you don't see something like what the Hamilton Ticats audio network do, where they produce, they actually produce their own sort of broadcasts and on online, and of course, they do have some radio outlets that bring the games, but they call it the Ticats audio network, as you're well aware.
Yeah. Why do they do that?
Again, for money.
That's their best chance to make money. I don't know if they're making any money or not, Ali. I don't.
No.
But I know they wouldn't be doing it unless that's their best chance at making money. It really is. And whether that money is, right away off the top of the broadcast, okay, we spent $30,000 and we made $30,001, or it's we spent $30,000, we got this many more listeners. That's all of that is kind of built into that money idea. So, at the end of the day, the Rangers, I think, ultimately will make the decision that is best to control their own product. And, I don't know, as a fan, Ali, this is a good question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Would you pay $2 a game to hear a Rangers broadcast?
No.
What's your price? What's your price, sunshine?
Well, honestly, if I can get it for free, I'd rather hear it for free.
You have nailed the salient point, my friend. That's very true. look, we pay for everything these days. We pay for streaming. We pay for, I pay for Sportsnet so I can watch the Blue Jays. There's
Well, you're a
obviously a
Sportsnet
price.
Plus subscriber?
Well, I don't know what I am. I get the Blue Jays games. That's all I
Okay.
know.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, like you just made a really interesting point. Would you pay $2 a game? What do they play? 66 games, $132 a year, so you could access every Rangers game on the radio.
No,
sure
and I
how many
mean we
people would
already
that.
do it to some degree. Like if you want to hear other broadcasts, like either you pay for the MLB audio or something,
Sure.
you already kind of do it. But I would prefer not to because everything adds up at the end of the day.
Well, look, we all know that everyone would prefer not to pay for anything. Ever.
Yeah.
We know that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And just, but in making that financial case for the Rangers, that's one of the things that they're going to have to weigh. So they could provide the streaming for free, and there's always a cost to streaming, so they're going to have to eat that cost. Or do you provide it on a $1 a game, $2 a game platform? I've always wondered about what does the NHL look like in a few years where the Leafs go, well, you can watch every Leaf game for $2 a game, $168 a year. If they had 1 million people sign up, that's $168 million. The money is big, bigger than most people think. So I'll be interested to see, but I think the Rangers will probably look to control their own product. I'd be surprised if they didn't.
Yeah, no, I do too. I see that as well happening, and I do because at the end of the day, they want to be in control of
Oh yeah,
the
absolutely.
rights.
Own your product, right?
Yep.
It's just like you. You've become a multimillionaire, Ali, because you control your own product.
Yep.
I think that joke went right by, didn't it? Just right by. Didn't even touch your hair.
Yeah, no, exactly, and certainly, and that's certainly, and I don't see. I mean, do you see? I don't see Bounce picking up the Rangers. I don't see.
No, I don't see any music station picking it up because the reality is this: they got to be able to make money.
Yeah.
And for a music station, their bread and butter is you can listen to this station and you're going to hear this music. Like, look, if 70% of people really liked polka music, we'd have a polka music station on the air. We would. Tomorrow, I'd put it on the air. But, people, and it's nighttime. So you have to start from the idea of it's nighttime. Very few people are listening to begin with. And then, okay, now we're going to niche programming it down. If you assume that 50% of the people who are listening to the music don't want to hear a hockey game, you just lost 50% of your audience. I've been in the business. I don't see where the win is there. I also wouldn't be surprised to see a station taken on for a year or so, because there may be some, leftover love for the Rangers / 570. But does that last long term? I don't think it does.
I mean, 570 News had they had the rights for years, and I don't know how they were able. I don't know since I think since the 90s they had the rights to the games, and I don't know whether it was. And I don't know how it kind of I guess there was nowhere else for them to go, but
that's not true. No, CKKW AM 1090.
Oh yeah, that's right too.
Part of the group that I was with. They had the games for years. Don Cameron had been a sports announcer at CKCO TV. I started at CKCO TV in 1983. So I've known Don for years. So the Rangers games were part of that. And then CKKW walked away from the games at a time when the Rangers weren't doing all that well. We've covered that ground before. And that's when the rights kind of moved over to 570 and stayed there. At the end of the day, Ali, and I mean this as no disrespect to the Rangers or to their fans or anything else, the decisions around the Rangers broadcast, etc., will always be made around, can this make us some money? And I am not sure And even though I'm not privy to the numbers at Rogers, I'm not sure that it was really making all that much money with them, as much as people may find that difficult to believe.
No, I believe that. I believe that. And like, no, did you sort of see the end of the station though? Like, do you remember? Of course, I mean they did. I mean Larry Fedoruk was doing some fill in there as for Farwell a little bit, and I was kind of surprised that my hope was that they would give him the afternoon talk show.
I am loath to say anything bad about fellow broadcasters. Let's just say that I wasn't the biggest fan of Larry Fedoruk. So, and maybe it has nothing to do with Larry, but he's in the Niagara area. He didn't really have a sense of what was going on in Kitchener-Waterloo. And I think if you're going to do it, again, this goes back to my criticism of Rogers on this. If you're going to do that kind of programming, then make that kind of programming local, right? And understand, what's going on in the area. And I just don't know if it's really tough to do when you don't live in the area.
Yeah, no, and of course, and I mean, yes, he's a very good broadcaster.
Again, I'm going to say the sentence. I'm loath to say anything bad about broadcasters.
Yeah.
Again, look, I don't know him. I can tell you, I approached listening to that as I did as a regular listener, and it just didn't do anything for me. And look, there are people out there who didn't like listening to me. I don't like those people. I will hunt them down and end them. But it just happens. Not everybody likes everybody.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and the thing was, and he was doing it, and the thing was too is he was doing it from home, and he was doing the show from home. That was another side of it. He was doing it from home, so which I think made sense for his setup. But
again, like I say, it's difficult to know. And if you're not a listener all the time, look, I will tell this story because I heard about it. I was listening at the end, just a few weeks before 570 was shut down.
Yeah,
and Mike had been again going on ad nauseum about the Montreal Canadiens and the sweater that you can't wear, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Hey, look, not my thing. It's why I can say ad nauseum, and I like Mike, and he's heard me say that to him 100 times before. Mm-hmm. And it was brought up when Larry was filling in, and Larry had no clue what anybody was talking about. Didn't have any idea that a Montreal Canadiens sweater wouldn't be allowed. Didn't know what Mike's rules were around that. And I thought that was unconscionable. I think if you're going to do the job, be ready to fill in. So,
yeah.
Again, no. I am loath to tear a strip off anybody because I recognize, having done it, that that's a difficult position to be in for Larry. So, I think he did the best that he could given the situation.
Mm-hmm.
We move on. Hopefully, he's got another gig somewhere.
Well, he has his own podcast.
Well, I know, great. It's hard to make money on podcasts.
No
one in this room would know that, would they?
Yeah, you're right about that.
So look, let's talk about something that to me that is more uplifting, and that's the Virgin Radio.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that.
Well, I have been advocating for that for 10 years. I didn't leave. I was asked to leave. I've been fired by most of the major broadcasters in this country. So I left Cool FM in August of 2014. I call it medical exhaustion in that they were sick and tired of me. But they wrote a big enough check that I didn't care. So, left there. A couple of years later, they completely bastardized the Cool FM show. And a couple of years later, they switched it over to Bounce. And Angie went over to 99.5, and along with Sarge, and they worked on that signal, which was very, very, very good music, and just could not. They gained a lot of traction for a show on a station that just didn't have that much reach. So to see them switched over to 105.3, which is the monster, as we used to refer to it. It's 100,000 watts of power. One of the biggest transmitters in the country. And when I was on Cool 105, we would get letters from people in Mississauga and Erie, Pennsylvania, to talk about our programming. That signal is so powerful. So I think with the music that they play, and with the personality that Angie Hill is and Sarge, and I think, in all honesty, and look, I'm biased. I worked with Angie for over 20 years, but I think she is the best radio personality in the region of Waterloo, and one of the best in the country. That now that she's back on that signal, they will get the ratings and the revenue that they deserve. And I'm hopeful that they'll ask me back, because we used to do an Angie, Sarge, and Brian. And we could do an Angie, Sarge, and Brian again. I work cheap.
Yeah, no, Angie is really good.
Now, have you had her on your podcast?
No, and I've been trying to.
All right, I'll put a good word in for you. And
Okay.
See if we can get it done. That she is. Look, I met Ange when she was, holy cow, 27, I think. We had never met, and I met her at 4:30 in the morning at the studios at King and University, and said, "Who the hell are you?" He said, "I'm Angie. I'm your co-host." Well, this is a great way to start. So, like, neither one of us knew anything about each other, but quickly, I'm about 10 years older than Angie, and quickly realized that she was, very bright, this tremendous personality, and given the temperature of radio back in the early 90s, the job of many female hosts was to just tell the traffic and laugh. And that was very disrespectful to somebody like Angie Hill, who had tremendous instincts, in the business. And still, today, I talk to Angie on a regular basis, and every now and then show up on her show, because I either need something or I'm lonely. But I think one of the best broadcasters in this country, and every year Oktoberfest gives out its Women of the Year awards, and I think it's a travesty that Angie Hill hasn't won a Woman of the Year award for the stuff that she does for charity. She is tireless. She lost her husband a few years ago to suicide. She speaks of the mental health challenges that come with that, with a bravery that you don't often hear. So people can say horrible things about Angie Hill, but I will fight them to the death on that, because she's one of my favorite people. So I just hope this switchover is going to be terrific. She's going to get listened to up in her native Huron, or Bruce County again, because she's a native of Ripley. So that's going to be good. They loved us up there back in the day, and they will love them again. So I think that's a little bit of good news of some people in the business getting the things that they deserve.
No, I'm a big Angie fan too. I like Angie Hill.
Well, and she's not as funny as she thinks she is. Let me tell you that. I am. She's not. So, anyways, I'm thrilled for her. She and I have talked endlessly about that 99.5 frequency, which if you listen long enough and far enough into Cambridge, it will magically switch over to WCDX in Buffalo, which is a religious station. So you can be on the highway to hell, and then you get the sermon from Jesus in the next 2 minutes. It's fantastic juxtaposition.
And even going down to even traveling down to Brantford.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Like, you can't get it past the en route on the 401. And I remember I was at the station and in the management group when we were talking about switching from what was then CKKW 1090 to KFUN 99.5. And that was the big concern, was the signal, is such that, we're going to have trouble. Here's the interesting thing. There's an agreement between Canada and the US that says your radio signals from one side cannot interfere with the ones from the other side. Apparently, Jesus gets an exemption. WCDX in Buffalo, I think it was Buffalo or Rochester, can't remember. It just pounds into Southern Ontario. And places like KFUN at 99.5 or Bounce 99.5, they can't compete with that, and they just get pushed out. So This will fix that because now they have the monster.
So what we're also saying is Virgin hadn't been doing all that well in that frequency then.
Virgin had never done well. Virgin, if I remember right, was put into place because there was an agreement to put the Virgin brand for as many ears as possible. And this is 2016. And by combining Halifax and KW, it made up for the loss of Edmonton in the Virgin chain. But if you do the math on that, it makes a certain amount of sense. So yeah, Virgin had always been struggling. Now, who knows? There's a Virgin station in London, there's a Virgin station in Toronto, and then you have one here in Kitchener, which was the most powerful of all the transmitters, and it just never seemed to get anywhere. Again, I don't get it, but it's not my music. Like, it's not aimed at me. So I'm the last person to criticize what they did with Virgin, except for the one thing, and that was not running a local morning show in Kitchener-Waterloo. I don't think any company should be allowed to do that. If you want a signal in Kitchener-Waterloo, run a damn morning show instead of simulcasting the one out of London. That's just lazy horse shit. That's all that is.
Yeah. And of course, Rogers just did that in Ottawa too.
Yeah, they've actually with Ottawa and a few others that they've done. Right? I nothing against the people who actually do the shows because they're not in control. But I just think at the very least you could do a local morning show. If you want to voice track your afternoons and stuff like that, go ahead and do it. But at the very least, do a morning show. Because and look, I know that I went through too many years of with consultants.
Yep.
Consultants who are, they're generally described as people who come from far away and wear a suit. And they would tell us, this is what people want to hear. The surveys would tell them they want to hear about entertainment. They want to hear about TV. They want to hear about, yeah, they do. I get it. But they may also want to hear about, and I told this story in there once, about the game my brother and I played when we were like 11 years old, which was called Tiger in a Box. And my brother was 13, I was 11. And in the Tiger in a Box game, the 11-year-old gets inside the cardboard box, and the 13-year-old grabs a lead pencil and tries to stab the tiger inside the box. This is a really bad game if you're 11, 13 years old. But everybody in their life has a story of some stupid game they played with their siblings, their friends. And that's what you lose when all you talk about are the awards from last night's TV show, et cetera, and we don't have, any common meeting points anymore as people. Used to be, you'd watch one of the 3 television networks at night, and you knew at least 30% of people you talked to were going to be watching that. We don't have anything like that anymore. Maybe the World Cup was the closest we got. So I just think not having a local morning show is a dereliction of duty on the part of broadcasters who have more than enough money to afford it.
Yeah, I don't like that either. It just makes no sense. It makes no sense. Oh, yeah. You know what? The old K. You reminded me of the old K Fund days. There was a lot of good stuff there. Stacey Thompson was part of that. Dave Schneider was part of that too.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of people. Stacey and Dave. Ross Pohl was there.
Ross Pohl. You remember Ross? Yeah, I remember Ross too.
Yeah, Ross. Well, sadly, Ross doesn't remember Ross. I've known Ross for a long time. He's an absolute gem. But there are a number of other people.
Is he still around, Ross? I haven't heard much of him, Ross Pohl.
Ross, he's happily retired from radio.
Yeah.
But Jay Harrington was one of the people there, was on the morning show for quite a while.
Yeah.
I had hired Jay. Larry Silver was on there as well. Legendary Larry Silver. Larry was a legend across the broadcast industry.
And I think he lives in this area still.
Larry lives in Cambridge.
Okay, yeah.
And I had an opportunity to hire Larry, and it took 3 phone calls from Larry before I hired him. So, because he was Larry Silver, like, holy cow! And I had when I'd gone to college, I grew up listening to Larry Silver newscasts. And so now I had a chance to hire Larry. I was a little bit leery. It turns out Larry's the easiest guy in the world to work with. So, a lot of really good people. There always were a lot of good people in this town, and
Laura Geddes was part of that, I think.
Yeah, Laura was another one I gave her first job to.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it was. I think it was doing traffic. But yeah, Laura Geddes was. I had a list of people that I'd given their first jobs in radio or in KW radio to, and it was Laura Geddes, Cat Callahan.
Cat Callahan, no, yes.
A few others along the way. Lindsay Vanstone, just a bunch. And I was always happy to help people out.
Yeah.
Always figured I was very fortunate that way. So.
Yeah, and I think too, and that's like you go back and these were good all and Jay Nyhouse was part of it as well at one point.
Yeah, and the funny thing is now with the way that the industry has evolved, so that there aren't as many on-air staff. In many cases, well, let's take a look at this. There are you got 1, 2, 3, 4 major radio stations in town in terms of Chime, 105.3 Bounce, and 106.7. A couple of those are missing morning shows. They don't have an in-town morning show. So you don't have the opportunities that used to be there to be able to promote individual items, promote charities, fundraisers, those kinds of things. They're not there anymore because there simply aren't any people.
Yep.
And that's not particularly good, for the local community. But again, it's the nature of the beast. I don't like it.
No.
But nobody cares what I think. So.
Yeah, I think Chime still has a local morning show though.
Chime still has a local morning show. They do a good job, but it's funny as these. The number of on-air staff has declined. The opportunities to go out there and work as an MC or whatever, they have declined as well. So it's tough out there, and it will be tough for charities. And it's in a day and age where it's very difficult to get the word out about what you're doing and when you're doing it. Like if you had to, Ollie, tell people about an event that's coming up in 3 weeks' time, how would you tell them?
Well, I mean, on air would be the first one.
Well, so on air from one station or another, that'd be nice. No guarantee that's getting on because they won't cover it.
No.
People will talk about social media, but what...
Well, you can put it on social media.
Yeah, but what you see on social media is controlled by the algorithms.
That's right, too.
So you could put up your promotional piece about the first annual Northern Michigan Badger race. But if you're not interested in Badger races, you're probably not going to see the posting for that.
No.
So, that's the problem. That people end up not knowing things are going on. Look, there's a municipal election in October. I will guarantee you right now, because I had this happen to me when I was still on the air, that a lady called me up and said, this is the day after the municipal election. And she said, I had no idea there was an election. I didn't get a chance to vote. And after about a 15-second stunned silence, I went, how can you not know? Like signs are everywhere. Coverage is everywhere as far as I know. But you didn't know there was a municipal election. I get it if you don't care about it. Understand that. But you didn't know? Like, people have become so lazy in finding out their information that, I don't know. I'm concerned that people will not know enough to make good decisions. Although some of our decisions have been suspect in the past.
Where do you see, I think the same could be said, for the publications things like The Record, The Star, etc. I mean, what do you see the future of these? Do you see I mean, you're not. I don't think people. I don't think everybody's going to subscribe to. I don't think people are going to subscribe, or I should say, majority to every every publication.
No, they're not. People are going to continue to do what they do now, which is they scroll through social media, they see something that might pique their interest,
Uh,
and they look at it that way. The major providers, and they still are major providers. The newspapers, etc. Um, they'll continue to put their information out, but of course it can't be shared on Facebook and things like that these days, which is sad, but it's the nature of the industry. Um, I think there's a real danger that people are being misinformed and disinformed, and that has led to a style of conversation that I don't think is particularly helpful. There's a lot of screaming and yelling and pointing and name calling, and you're a libtard and you're a con, and I'm not sure that does us any good. So I think that will continue. I don't know what the solution is to that. I like to think, we continue to have respectful conversations, and everybody will kind of join in. And Skittles and kangaroos, everything's perfect. But I'm not confident that's going to happen.
No, and I don't think so either. And what about on talk radio? Like, are you still a fan of call-in segments? Farwell did that a lot. Still.
Well, that's often mandated from top down. It sometimes takes a while to get people to call. But the problem is you generally get the same suspects, as I'm sure you noticed.
Exactly.
That is problematic. It can be entertaining. I think if you have a host who's willing to take on people who, kind of make stuff up as you go along. I think it's an interesting way to get feedback. I wouldn't base any decisions on what those people say, because it's just not a very good random sample. I think there's still a future for talk radio. The company's always said that it was really expensive to produce. Hi, exhibit number 1 here, not that expensive. Know what expensive looks like. It wasn't me. It's not really that expensive to produce. I like the idea of a program where you have an interview with somebody for 10 minutes, and then you have some feedback on that, and then you can move on. I liked that because there's a lot of interesting things going on, a lot of interesting, informed people to talk to. But, is there a way to do that, over the internet? Live podcasts, can you take calls? You can do all that stuff. But again, you have to train people to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And people aren't trained to do that right now. And it takes time. It's one of the things about the 570 shows, when we had to train people that these are the times when you can call in about anything you want, doesn't matter. But it takes time for people to actually buy into that. Some people say 7 to 10 impressions before they get the idea. So I don't know. I think there's future there. I just don't know what it looks like or where it is.
No, I agree with you there. Like, for me, I just, and the reason I didn't like call-ins, I used to for a time, and I did for a time, and I think the late Wayne McLean was good at taking calls. He was good at taking calls.
I knew Wayne from my time in Windsor. I'd actually met Wayne when I was working at CKWW in Windsor. That's going back early 80s, actually 1980. Wayne was the talk show host there. And then he went up to London for a while, and then he came to Kitchener. Wayne was beautiful, God rest his soul, because if you went into him in the hallway and you'd say, yeah, great segment about whatever that was, Wayne would go, don't care. I never exactly knew what Wayne's positions were, but he would take whichever one worked out to get the most calls.
Yeah.
There's a level of talk show brilliance there that very few people can attain. So, and again, no disrespect to Wayne, that was the way it worked. You could listen one day and he'd be completely anti-abortion, and the next day he'd be completely for abortion.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. Oh, but he really got the phones to ring, though. That was it.
Oh no, he was the absolute master at that. And really, it's not that difficult a thing to do. you just have to stake out a position, right? You have to say that I don't particularly like the blue in Ollie's dresser, right?
Mhm.
And then, because then you have two choices. People will call up and say, no, I like the blue. It looks good. It matches his eyes. And someone else will call up and say, no, the blue looks stupid. I hate it. So pick a position. You don't even have to defend it. All you have to do is pick a position, and then people will come at you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Now,
it.
it is easier to pick a petition if you actually believe in it. That's makes your life a whole lot easier. But it doesn't change the basic fact.
No, and there are still people that are, and there are people that are good at it that used to be really good at it. I mean, Jerry Agar was good, has been good. I mean, he used to. I mean, I don't know if he does. I haven't listened to Agar in a while, but he used to be. He was really good at running a talk show. Like there are a lot of people who, I think, have done it very well.
Oh, and look, it takes a certain skill set. I can't. There's a couple of people I heard in the past who I always wanted to say, look, you have to be something. You can't just come on and say, what do you think? And then, you have to encourage people to come on and give their viewpoint. And if you just ask them, what do you think? The people who are in the middle, they're not going to do anything. So you have to be a little bit more provocative than that. Not to the point of making stuff up, but, like I always found it was very effective if there was somebody on there who was, just spewing some kind of garbage, that if you could make fun of them, that would initiate the next caller to come on and say, "Oh, you're so unfair." I'm not unfair. They're being stupid. We can't have stupid. What are we going to do with that? So,
exactly. Yeah. Well, Brian, we got to do this again in the future. We really have to do this again.
Yeah. Hopefully it's not the next time a radio station shuts down.
No. You know what? We got to do some. You know what? I think we got to do some. We got to do some news and some news politics. We got to do some of that sometime.
Well, the midterms are coming up.
Yes.
That'll be interesting. We live in a very interesting place these days. So for old news guys like me, that's the best place you can live.
Yeah, why not? Let's do it. Let's do something.
All right. Thanks.
And we'll be back with more content coming up.